3, 2, 1.
Well, what's going on, Metaverse Church Podcast friends? So good to be hanging out with you again today. And today we've got another guest for you. Today we are bringing in John Hazel from One Community Church, who they've also been in the VR platform for a little bit now, but I'm going to let him introduce himself to you all. And so that being said, John, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Thanks, Stu Nami, for having me on, Stuart. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to say, and I meant to say this right from the get-go, you're probably the closest thing I have to a friend that is like Tony Stark. Like, if I wanted to be friends with Tony Stark, John is who I go to for that. Like, you are that guy. Just like
Great.
what you know tech-wise and whatnot. It's just so great. So great.
That's my goal, so I'm glad.
All right, man. So let's dive into this. Let's talk about it. So who are you? Why do people want to get to know you?
Yep. All right. Well, I'm John Hazel. You can't just call me John because there's a million Johns in the world. So I introduce myself as John Hazel, as almost like a one syllable thing. So John Hazel, or one phrase. So, and then Starkcontrast. The whole reason you just said that is I came up with that as my pseudonym. I hadn't had a pseudonym since I was like 11 years old, which I grew up a nerd. I, played video games, and, I was Super Smash Brothers Melee addict at like 13 years old. Loved it. I just gave away my age, I guess, right, with that. But that was my game. And but before that, I was Sonic the Hedgehog nerd. And so when I was 11, I would be on web forums with other Sonic the Hedgehog. I was writing fan fiction. I was like designing my own Hedgehog character in Microsoft Paint, all of that kind of stuff. That I say that like it's a normal thing, all that kind of stuff, like you would know. My dad was a programmer, C# and .NET and stuff. And so I picked up his HTML book when I was 11 and started building websites, and started, just messing around, having fun, building Flash animations back in the day, those awful days of Flash. I had a friend who had a bootleg copy of Adobe, so I started playing around with Adobe tutorials and in Photoshop, whatever it was back then. So that's kind of where I got started with tech. And then in high school, I did some programming. I got to do Java, C++, some Oracle database design, and game programming. So it was fun. So I kind of got started, got into life and adult life. And basically, I tried to make all my own plans. And God said, nope, I've got a different plan for you. Is pretty much how it's a very long story, very short. God redirected my life and ended up putting me in ministry. And so now I've had, over 10 years in ministry across only 2 different churches as far as being employed. And and then I had in 2020, God kind of redirected us. We helped, my wife and I helped plant a church in Colorado Springs. So we kind of oversaw the guest services part of that. And then I went self-employed from being at the tech director at a church for a long time. Went self-employed doing web design and development. Had a big project there, basically taking a Ruby on Rails website and turning it into a WordPress website. And then God moved us to Dallas. We were in Colorado. That was kind of home for me. I was born in Houston, grew up on the East Coast, or childhood on the East Coast in Virginia, and then landed in Colorado for 15 years. And then in 2020, God moved us here, actually just to be a part of this church. We literally visited this church for our friend's wedding, One Community Church, from Colorado, flew down here, came to the wedding, and then came to service on Sunday. Sat through service. My wife looked at me and said, I would move here to be a part of this. And I said, I would too. And then over a year later, God said, it's time. During that year was when we had that, church planting and the self-employment and stuff. So it's just been wild to look back on. But we were getting ready to move here, and I was like, this is cheesy Christianese, but I feel like Dallas is a promised land. And I was like, I'm not a fan of Christianese because I've been in the church my whole life, and I'm like, we need to say what we mean what we say. And but I was like, but I don't know what that is. I don't know. And it turns out it was a prophecy. We then we have been trying to get pregnant for a long time, and we got pregnant right after we moved here. And so a lot of transition the last couple of years. During that time, I took a sales job at a great company called Leader, a people development software down here in Plano. And it was really cool because I was selling to churches about people development, which is my passion. So it was like all of the things I love. It was a tech startup because it's a software that we're selling, a software as a service. And I didn't think I could do cold call sales. I'm actually more introverted than extroverted, believe it or not. I'm an INTP on the Myers-Briggs, but I'm right on that line of introvert extrovert. So I did that, and then my wife ended up coming on to staff here, like right off the bat. We had connected with pastor right before we moved here, and that was never the plan. We actually wanted to come and hide in the background. I'm so done with ministry. I want to be in the business world. I've always wanted to be in the business world. God's giving me an out. I'm sticking with the out. But then God called me back into church, and so here I am. I came on as the digital experience lead in August of 2021. And then in February 2022, Pastor Conway said, we're going to launch a Metaverse campus. You can do it. He just sent me a text. And he was like, 8 weeks till Easter. Launch it on Easter. We got this. You got it. Actually, he didn't say we got this. He said, you got this. And so then Pastor Matt, our executive pastor, was connected with our mutual friend, Jeff Reed. And so he got me connected with Jeff, and that's how I got plugged in. And actually, what's crazy is I connected with you before I connected with Jeff, because I just was doing my own research, and I was hopping around to the existing Metaverse churches. I stopped by and met you. You're one of the few people that I met as an avatar first before I saw your face. Yep. And definitely the first one. Yeah. Wow. Crazy. Now here we are. Crazy. Yeah, and we just moved into spatial after a year in alt space.
Yeah, dude, that's crazy, man. I love hearing your story. I feel like each time that you and I talk, I get a little bit more of a glimpse into just the awesome story that God's writing in your life. And I think even as time has gone on, at one point you and I were just chit-chatting, and you and I ended up finding out that we were both living in Colorado Springs at the exact same time. Didn't even know it. And now that we're both, you're all the way down in Dallas, I'm all the way up in the frozen tundra of Wisconsin, and we were both doing the same type of ministry. And it's in those separate locations where all of a sudden God made our paths cross, and it's just fascinating how God works. I will say this though, as you're sharing your background and your story, when I think from the outside perspective, looking into Metaverse ministry and listening to this podcast and just VR in general, you, to me, you fit to the T, the type of person that I would expect to be doing ministry in the metaverse. Your whole tech background, website building, coding, video game, all that kind of stuff. That to me, if I was on the outside looking in, I'd be like, this is the profile of the type of individual that I'm looking for in order to lead us into the metaverse. And what's crazy is that's just not me. That's not who I am. I'm not a gamer whatsoever. My running joke in a lot of the learning communities that you and I have been a part of and conferences have been the last gaming console that I owned was an Xbox 360 that I bought in order to play Blu-ray discs because that was the most popular thing at the time. And I bought it off of a credit card that Dave Ramsey would be super ticked off to hear about. And yet here I am, launching a campus, leading a church campus in virtual reality. And so I just love right there. That's what somebody who listens to this podcast, like a church leader, needs to hear, is that there is not a one size fit all personality type to do what it is that you and I are doing, which really speaks to just the overall characteristic of God, of who God is, right? God's always been the type of person that says, hey, you see yourself doing one thing, I see you and designed you for something completely different. I'm taking all peoples from all walks of life in order to advance my kingdom. So, dude, that's what I say. Like, I love hearing your story. So
that's it, man. And actually, to clarify a little bit, I haven't been a gamer since I was 19. I haven't like hardly. Actually, the only reason we have an Xbox, it's an Xbox One, I think. I'm pretty sure it's an Xbox One. The only reason we have it is because somebody gave it to us, and we touch it about once a year. So I'm not a gamer anymore. I grew up a gamer, and I don't know. I just lost interest at about 19. And so in a lot of ways, I fit the profile, and then in a lot of other ways, I've been trying to separate myself from tech for like the last 5 years, and I just realized it's never going to happen. Because I have so much experience, so much curiosity, so much education. So I'm like, well, I really can't separate myself from tech, but I had to get down to why am I trying to do that? And I realized that it's because I get frustrated with feeling profiled, with feeling like I'm stuck in this box of the tech support guy. And I'm like, no. My skill, my strength is invention. But it's the ideation side. I'm not the inventor that follows through and tinkers and makes it happen. Like, I'm the ideator, and I start the thing, and I need people around me who will implement, because my mind is literally just constantly firing with ideas. And so and it's very hard to choose which ones I'm going to run with. And so there's parts of me that kind of fit that profile. But what's crazy is that my team leader for the Metaverse, Vincent, his name is H2O on Spatial, and his pseudonym is H2O. He is not a techie at all. That's not his field. He's not in technology, but he's a great, caring, relational leader. And so the people that I place under his leadership, he just really stewards them very well. And then he's also very strong with the week to week. I'm very good at kicking something off, but I'm very bored on week 2. And so after I got things kicked off in alt space, I let them run with it. And so like every week they're excellent at maintaining and at being intentional to hit those deadlines every week of, we got to have everything in the slideshow. We got to have those recordings. So it's just wild how God assembles. He designed us for relationship. And so he intentionally puts us with people who have strengths where we have weaknesses, and weaknesses where we have strength. Now, the challenge of that is that then there's friction, because it's like, I want my way, or why can't you think like me? And so that's where the fruits of the Spirit come in, and we got to be humble and be like, okay, I see where you fill this void, and it's not how I would do it, but I'm grateful that I have somebody who can complement. You know what I mean?
Dude, so good. So good. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Because I agree with you. Like, I have worked with many different people who, I'll put it this way. My wife and I, we talk about this all the time. So my wife and I went through a church planning assessment about 8 years ago. And one of the things that they came back with, like when you go into one of these assessments, they ask you to do all these profile exams and fill out all these different questionnaires prior to showing up. And really the idea is, like, they've got these professional biblical counselors and whatnot that are there at these assessments, and they know more about you than you know about yourself going into the assessment. And I think one of the greatest compliments that my wife and I have ever been given is, we sat down with these assessors and with these counselors, and they were like, dude, we just love, and we see it all over you guys, not only in person, but on paper. You guys are just team members. You guys don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but you guys work with each other in order to accomplish a goal or a task. And it's so true. I think one of the most common statements that my wife and I have with each other is, my wife's a type A personality. And so she's got her rhythm. She's got her routine. She knows how things should get done or need to get done. And I think one of the common phrases that I say is like, hey, just because you see it being done this way doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. So we just work well as a team based off of just the two different personality types and styles that we have from each other. And I do agree with you. I think that's just part of God's design of, like, I'm going to take two different individual people, sinful people, and make them work together. And in so doing, the beauty of my creation, who I am, the Christ and the bride of the church, end up getting shown off in a complementary style like that. So yeah, dude, good word. So let's pull on that thread a little bit. Let's talk about One Community Church, you guys being in virtual reality. So how long have you guys been in there now?
So we launched Easter of 2022, and it is right now, as we're recording this, what are we in, May of 2023. AltSpace shut down in, what was it, March?
Yep.
So when AltSpace shut down, we took a 2 or 3 week break, and we relaunched the day after Easter. So Monday, after Easter Sunday, we relaunched our Metaverse campus in Spatial, which was unique to be like, most people, they might have an Easter service on Saturday or Friday, but an Easter service on Monday was kind of unique. But it was awesome. So it was a long Easter week. I think we had Easter weekend basically started on Thursday and ended late Monday night for us. But it was it's been really cool, because kind of one of my philosophies is to, let me say it this way. So if y'all are familiar with the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTP, like I mentioned before, and INTPs are kind of known for being, we crave to break things down to the most fundamental frameworks and rebuild from there, which means we want to really understand things. And the way we understand a lot of times is through introverted sensing or memory, is like I'm going back through my memory bank, and I'm building this kind of collective of what I've experienced. And then that's kind of our secondary way, but our primary way is through extroverted intuition. And so you may see me do it on this call. Is like, it's really important for me to make sure that I'm having times where I'm interfacing with other people that are safe for me, because extroverted intuition can sometimes appear very ADD because I'll chase rabbits, right? I'll go down all these rabbit trails, and you'd be like, how did we get here? And how do we get back? And what's actually the objective? What are you actually going for, right? So, and it's because extrovert intuition is all about patterning things. I'm always trying to pattern and pattern things through exploration. So I'm exploring an idea, and then what happens is that an idea triggers of this connection between two totally disparate things, right? Two things that are like completely disconnected, and I'll see a parallel between them, and I'll bring that in, and that'll become a metaphor that I'll use, right? Or it'll become something that opens my mind up to another possibility or whatever. So I'm talking really conceptual right now. So I'm trying to bring a way to bring it back down. But let me go back to what I was trying to say. Because I believe in fundamental frameworks, because my primary function is introverted thinking, which is all about getting things accurate. And it's very logic. It's very programmer-esque. And so you get a lot of logic and programmer. Now, to go back to what I said earlier, where I was trying to separate from myself from tech, is I realize that I need diversity in my tasks and everything, because I get very bored if I'm doing one thing. So if I was a full-time programmer, I think I would lose it. I would have a very hard time with that. But getting to like dabble in scripting sometimes when I need to automate something, but also getting to, dabble in launching a Metaverse campus is a lot of fun for me. So that's enough about me. Let's go back to the Metaverse. The reason I said that was to say that I have a philosophy that you want to learn the designer's intent as early as possible as you're building frameworks and habits of how you're going to use something. So the reason I say that is to say that when we knew we were going to shift out of AltSpace, we had to, my Oculus is in the drawer there, but there's a great app on the Oculus called Noda, Noda, and it's a 3D mind mapping tool. And it's literally what I've wanted since I saw Tony Stark on Iron Man 2 pull up this hologram and start manipulating it and talking to Jarvis about, he was rediscovering the element that his dad had discovered, right? I was like, I need that, right? Because what that is that's like the collision of my extroverted intuition, my introverted thinking, and my introvert. It's like me being able to externalize my brain and be like, oh, I see where these dots connect. And so I feel like, oh my gosh, the possibility is infinite there. Well, Noda, when I started working on the Metaverse campus and that idea hit my head of like, oh my gosh, virtual reality is a perfect place for mind mapping. And I already do some mind mapping through on my computer and iPad and phone through iThoughts X, or I'll just bullet point stuff in Markdown in the Drafts app, and then I'll move it to there, and it'll flesh out a visual of my mind, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, 3D mind mapping, how awesome would that be? So I started to search the Oculus store and found Noda. I was like, this is the best thing ever. The problem is I can't wait for AR because like VR is too much friction to get into. It's like it takes. I gotta pick up my headset. I gotta put it on. I gotta boot it up. I gotta load up the app. By then, I've already forgotten the first idea of why I was trying to mind map something anyway. I do. But sometimes I do quiet time in there, and like literally, I'll just like God will give me ideas, and I'm just like. You can pull in images, so I'll pull in like a devotional, or you can pull up a web browser, so I'll pull up Bible.com, and God will just speak to me, and I'll be able to visualize everything. It's really cool. So the reason I brought that up was to say I got in there with one of my team members because you can join the same room and mind map together, and I just started saying, okay, what are our essential criteria for the platform we're moving to? What are the ideal criteria for that? And we kind of started mind mapping that out. And then we started with, okay, well, here's the platforms we know something about. And by the way, this was like 2 weeks before we're supposed to launch, probably 2-3 weeks. Like I don't feel the pressure until the last minute, and it drives my teams crazy.
Launching into spatial or to alt space?
Spatial.
Okay.
Yeah, Altspace was kind of planned for me a little bit. I was blessed because Goose built our world and all that. But we're getting a few weeks from our launch into spatial. And I'm like, my team members are like, we have no plan what's going to happen. And I'm like, all right, let's get in and let's get this done. And so we decided on spatial. And the reason was because cross-platform was essential for us because we believe that the strictly VR audience right now is mostly a gamer audience, and nobody on my team, well, maybe one or two people on my team are gamers, but we're mostly not gamers. So for us, the audience we want to hit is people that are focused on social, which is why Altspace was so good. They're wanting to socialize. Right. And so the spatial platform was cool because of the cross-platform, people being able to have a bridge into the metaverse. So it's even, Altspace had a web, had a computer client, so you could download on your computer and access. And we actually had some volunteers. We have some volunteers on the Metaverse team who don't have virtual reality headsets. So for them, that was it was like, well, if we go into what's it called, Horizons, we're immediately excluding people that are actually on our team as volunteers. They won't be able to volunteer anymore, or they'll be forced to buy a headset. So that doesn't feel like an option. And two, we want to be able to have low friction to bringing people onto our team. So when somebody shows interest in the digital experience, which is what I oversee, is like the department I oversee. Within that, we have our web team that focuses on web, app, anything online, basically. Google, SEO, digital analytics, everything online, basically. And then we have our online engagement team that focuses on the live chat online engagement, as well as like the review, Google business reviews, like all the correspondence with people online. And then we have our Metaverse team. And then we have within the digital, of course, we have other people who support an administrative role. By the way, I'm the only person on staff by Digital Experience. So everything I'm describing to you, this is all volunteer structure. I have volunteer leaders in those places. And then I have sub-teams within those. So we meet, we have a Zoom meeting every Monday at 6:30 p.m. For the whole digital team. And before that, at 6 p.m. every Monday, we have we jump on the call early with the core team of the digital experience for us to talk about what's going to happen in the huddle, look at the last week and stuff. And then throughout the week, we have other things. Like we've got a web focus group on Wednesday night and different things going on. So we're a volunteer-driven culture. We're heavy volunteers. So that being said, I needed easy on-ramp to get people into serving in the metaverse. And so cross-platform was an essential criteria for us. Another essential was a culture, because like Goose talks about, these are different continents, right? Like Rec Room is a whole different continent from Spatial. And so the culture that we needed to have was needs to have a pretty social culture. Now we get a lot with AltSpace that's similar, or a lot with Spatial that's similar to AltSpace in the sense of people, not everybody's in there to socialize. Sometimes people are in there and they don't want to talk. They're in there for the design. They're really sensory people, right? So this is an extroverted sensing concept. By the way, there's an amazing website called personalityhacker.com, and they have a car model that gives a really great metaphor for understanding your personality. And this has been transformative for me. So that extroverted sensing is like people who are very highly sensory. They take in data through their five senses. That's not me at all. That's in my shadow, right? Now I enjoy good design, and I get stressed out when something's not designed well. There's certain websites I can't visit. I have like a 2-second tolerance threshold. So there's people that are walking around AltSpace for the design, and then Spatial is actually very intentionally geared toward design, right? Yeah. So it's the artwork. And so, see, here we go with that long tangent stuff. There's so much I want to share. So much I want to share in a short time. So I'm going to reel it back in. So what I wanted to say was that Spatial is designed for artists in a lot of ways, but also for people to network and commune. And Spatial is also shifting their focus, especially with the AltSpace shutdown. So they are trying to be more community oriented. But I was like, why don't we leverage their art focus? So this brings me all the way back to when we're shifting into Spatial. I said, what's the designer's intent? The designer's intent was the artwork. And so I said, why don't we pique the interest of people that are in this space because they're interested in next gen technologies like Metaverse, like NFT, like crypto, and like AI, which of course is, whereas Metaverse was the buzz at the end of 2021, a couple of years ago. Yeah. Metaverse was the buzz, right? Right now, AI is the buzz.
Absolutely.
And so I'm like, all right, so let's do some AI generated Bible focused artwork. So for our launch on Easter, I had my team, we use Discord for our internal communication as well as a discipleship platform for people who join the Metaverse campus. And so I'm there, I'm prompting them to come up with ideas. And I actually started forcing is a strong word. I actually started strongly encouraging my team members. You can't force a volunteer because they could just opt out. But I started really encouraging my team members and trained them on one of our Zoom calls on ChatGPT and gave them ideas of how they can use ChatGPT and other AI platforms. I also showed them how DALL-E works, how to do image generation. And I brought some context and clarity that, because there's some people that are worried about, with very good reason. There's danger in AI, but guess what? Like there's danger in everything. Like everything has a potential for good and a potential for evil, because that's how God designed the universe, because it's the only way to have true relationship with him, right? If he designed it where we can't choose to turn away, then that means that we can't choose to turn toward him, right? So everything's going to have a good side and an evil side. Like the devil used scripture to tempt Jesus, right? So just because someone's saying words from the Bible doesn't mean that they're using them the right way. And that's just Bible. The devil said quoted scripture. So anyway, we don't need to go to theological, because I didn't go to seminary, so I'm not interested in getting too deep in that stuff. But my point is that every tool can be used as a weapon. Every weapon can be, every weapon is a tool. Every tool is a weapon. Like, it's all about how are you using it. And so AI has strong potential danger, which is why we need to get so familiar with it now. And it's the same thing with the metaverse. Metaverse has strong potential danger and strong potential good, which is why we need to get familiar with it. But humans have a natural aversion to new things because there may be a natural curiosity and excitement, but there's an aversion because it's like my life has become relatively predictable, and I don't know what that's going to cause. What is that going to create? And so we get caught up in fear. Anyway, so I was showing them, like, AI is a machine. AI is just machine. Metaverse is just another digital way to have these platforms where we have where we socialize, where we have commerce, marketplace. We have all these different things, right? It's just another way to interact with each other. Just like email is, right? Or just like physical mail is, right? Like, it's just there's nothing new under the sun. So anyway, my point is I train them on, here's how AI works. Here's how you get good results. Here's how you get terrible results. And I ask them to have ChatGPT help them generate prompts for DALL-E or other AI image generators. And so we got some Easter artwork in our spatial platform because we knew artwork is going to draw people in. We also are big, like, the heart of our church is leadership development. So we've got lots of resources. So we pulled in from, like, our sermon notes and some of our handouts and stuff, graphics, and put them on the wall, and then provided links to those resources. So we can just help people with their own personal growth, with spiritual growth, but also just with things that are going to help them in their personal life. Because sometimes you're not going to capture somebody's attention through developing them spiritually. Sometimes you capture their attention by developing them personally, and helping them just get better in their life. Just like Jesus didn't always capture somebody's attention through spiritual conversation, but by healing them physically. And then their attention is locked on and they're like, how can I be more like you? Right? All right. I'll stop there. I give you you got questions for me, I'm sure. So
no, dude, it's good. Like, so this is what I'm hearing. Who you are, you said that you are more geared towards people development.
Mm-hmm. Me personally, as well as in our church, it's more leadership. It's people development, but that's kind of secondary to leadership development.
Hey friends, thanks for checking out this episode of the Metaverse Church Podcast. I know that we kind of ended out of nowhere, but let me tell you the reason why. Our friend John there at OCC was dropping so much knowledge during our conversation that we had no choice but to cut this one up into 2 parts. So if you want to continue this conversation and hear all the great wisdom that John has dropped, be sure to show back up next week for a brand new episode of the Metaverse Church Podcast, which will be part 2 of our conversation with John. So until then, do us a favor, share, subscribe, rate, review, and all those kinds of things helps us out. And we'll see you next week for another episode of the Metaverse Church Podcast. Until then, be blessed.